Here we go. Week 8 of the fantasy football season is right around the corner, but what wide receiver should we start and sit this week? Hey, what's going on, everybody? Jake, Fantasy Headliners. Hopefully everybody's doing good out there, and here we go with Week 8, talking starts and sits for the wide receiver position. Like usual, I'm going to break down every game, give you my start-sit designation for all the top wide receivers in each matchup, and try to help you guys make these decisions a little bit easier. Before I do, don't forget, Saturday night, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time, I'm going to be doing a live show here on the channel. So if you're not subscribed, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell, because you don't want to miss when I go live. We like to have a lot of fun on the live shows. I answer a lot of your questions, lots of shouts out. I do some Let It Flow. I got all kinds of stuff going on there for the live shows. You don't want to miss it. Saturday night, this Saturday, 9:30 p.m. Eastern. Make sure you're ready. Bring your questions. Looking forward to it. But for now, let's break down every matchup, talk some wide receivers here for Week 8. Thursday night football, Miami Dolphins at Houston Texans. Start off with the Dolphins, and we have a whole lot of injuries. You got Albert Wilson out. Kenny Stills out. Danny Amendola limited in practice. We may actually have the equivalent to a Bigfoot sighting and see Devontae Parker this week. I know, control your emotions. I know you're excited. You're going to see a lot of reports, though. There's a lot of rumors going around. They could absolutely pepper Devontae Parker with targets, trying to boost his value enough so they can find somebody who wants him in a trade, because right now, nobody wants him. Danny Amendola has that limited tag, but I have a feeling that's more of a maintenance-related issue, trying to keep him healthy and rested up. They're going to need him on Thursday night, and he's a decent flex play option in PPR leagues. His past 2 weeks under Brock Osweiler have been his best 2 weeks of the season. He's somebody that's being looked at in this offense. He's the clear number one target this week. Hakeem Grant, he's going to be very much big play, home run play dependent, TD dependent. He's not really one of those guys that's going to go out there and get a large amount of volume. Last week, a whole 2 catches for 32 yards. But like I said, he has that high ceiling. It's just inconsistent. Devontae Parker, yeah, he may see a lot of touches or a lot of targets. Does he do anything with it? It's Devontae Parker, and you just never know. I'm not starting him at all this week. I will take Danny Amendola as a flex play only in PPR leagues, and I'm abandoning the rest. For the Texans side of the football, you got DeAndre Hopkins and Will Fuller. Kiki, do you love me? QT probably will not play this week. He's already been ruled doubtful. So what does that mean? A lot of value heads back towards Will Fuller. And DeAndre Hopkins is already a must start. Doesn't matter who he plays, you're going to start him. Had a great catch last week, one-handed catch up against Jalen Ramsey. It doesn't matter, though. If you have him, you start him. He's the number 3 wide receiver in fantasy football. Will Fuller, though, somebody who's kind of, I don't want to say struggled, but he's been, on the lower tiers here the last couple weeks. Last week against Jacksonville, 6 catches for 68 yards. The weeks before that against Buffalo and Dallas, only had 2 catches in each game. He's kind of disappeared here as of late. That was mostly in part to Kiki taking away some of those targets. Kiki's not going to be there. I fully expect a heavy dose of Will Fuller going up against the Miami Dolphins secondary, which is decent, the 11th ranked defense against opposing wide receivers. Last week against the Detroit Lions, though, only gave up 10 receptions, 128 yards. So they're three-headed monster of receivers there. It's a decent secondary in Miami. They don't get a whole lot of credit for it, but it doesn't matter. I'm starting DeAndre Hopkins, and I'm starting Will Fuller this week against the Dolphins. Eagles at Jags are next. Start off with the Eagles. You have Alshon Jeffrey and Nelson Aguilar there for the Eagles. And Alshon Jeffrey is going to be somebody who kind of fringes back into that must start every single week just for the chemistry that he has with Carson Wentz and the way they utilize him in that offense. He's only been back for 4 games, has 4 touchdowns, double digits, over 20 points a game, 3 out of those 4 games. Yes, it is a very difficult matchup for him. He'll probably be paired up with Jalen Ramsey, but this is one of those things where you just can't afford to sit him for that big play ability. The Jacksonville Jaguars have given up some yardage here over the past few weeks. That defense has looked vulnerable at times. Like I just mentioned with DeAndre Hopkins, he was able to get loose a little bit off Jalen Ramsey. Same thing could happen with Alshon Jeffrey. He's going to be a start for me this week. Nelson Aguilar is somebody who's only going to be in deeper leagues. If you're in a 12-team league or deeper, he's a solid flex play at best. More than likely, hopefully, in PPR leagues. He's somebody who's been limited, hasn't had a touchdown since week 2. He's just not being looked at as often as he was with Nick Foles under center. Now it's more the Zach Ertz and Alshon Jeffrey show. Nelson Aguilar, larger leagues, flex play only at this point for me here in week 8. On the Jags side of the football, you have a whole lot of head scratching. You got Dede Westbrook, Keelan Cole, and Dante Moncrief. Moncrief, who had the best week last week, 7 catches for 76 yards against Houston, but it's kind of been a hit and miss. They're alternating weeks. It's not just one person being consistent. And then you have the whole Blake Bortles experiment, which seems to be a roller coaster upon itself. And now, is Cody Kessler going to be the quarterback? I mean, what's going on in Jacksonville? Carlos Hyde gets brought into the mix. I mean, you can throw against Philadelphia. They are the 27th ranked team against opposing wide receivers, giving up 44 points almost to opposing wide receivers. Last week against the Panthers, 213 yards and a touchdown. I mean, they can be thrown on in Philadelphia a lot more than they can be run on. The problem is, here in Jacksonville, we really don't know who to trust. If I had to choose one right now, to me, the safest play is Dede Westbrook, but even he's been inconsistent. Dante Moncrief, he's had double-digit points 4 times so far out of 7 games, but is it going to be his week? We just don't know. As of right now, to play it safe, unless I have no better options, I'm going to sit all of the Jacksonville Jaguar wide receivers until we can get some clarity on that offense and where they're going here in the next few weeks. Broncos and Chiefs are next, so we'll start off with Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders. And what's absolutely crazy to me is, and I don't know if you guys realize this, his owners probably do, Emmanuel Sanders right now is the number 4 ranked wide receiver in all of fantasy football in PPR leagues. The guy has been balling out of control this year, averaging almost 20 points a game. Now he gets a matchup against the Chiefs, who you have to throw against. The Chiefs are going to score points. You're going to have to throw in Denver. That defense is not containing anybody these days, and it didn't matter even if they were. This Kansas City Chiefs offense finds a way to score points. They're going to have to throw a lot. Emmanuel Sanders, being the favorite target, is going to be a definite must-start for me this week. Demaryius Thomas has been inconsistent, right? He had a couple weeks there with the touchdowns. Both weeks 5 and week 6 had a touchdown. Looked like he was turning things around. Had double digits 3 out of the last 4 weeks. Came out last week, 5 catches, 42 yards. Now, that was the majority against Patrick Peterson, so I'll give him that. Going now up against the Kansas City Chiefs, I expect, like I said, a lot of throwing from the Denver Broncos, and I will also start Demaryius Thomas this week in what I hope to get either garbage points or a shootout, resulting either way in fantasy points for my team. On the Chiefs side of the football, you have Tyreek Hill and Sammy Watkins, and I've learned my lesson with the Chiefs. It doesn't matter who they play, where they play, what time the game starts, or what plays are called. I'm starting everybody in this offense. Tyreek Hill, the number 2 fantasy wide receiver right now, definite must start for me. And then Sammy Watkins. Yes, he's not sexy. Some of you even looked away when I said Sammy Watkins and kind of did a double take. I get it. It's Sammy Watkins. But even Sammy is averaging 10 points a game in this offense. Last week against Cincinnati, 4 catches for 74 yards. Hasn't been overly consistent, but he's a decent part of this offense in Kansas City. And right now, you want as many parts of this offense as you can get. I'm going to start both these guys, Tyreek Hill and Sammy Watkins. Browns and Steelers are next, so we'll start off with Jarvis Landry and Antonio Callaway. Now, Antonio Callaway, somebody who's got that ability. He's got that home run potential. He just can't get on the same page with Baker Mayfield, and until he does, he's going to be a sit for me. Jarvis Landry, on the other hand, is somebody who is an absolute must-start this week for me against the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers defense, who is 26th against opposing wide receivers, giving up, on average, 43.5 points per game. They've given up receiving touchdowns to opposing wide receivers every single game this year, and Jarvis Landry is going to be their top receiving option. He's going to see a lot of work. He's going to see a lot of targets. They need a lot from Jarvis Landry to be competitive in these games. He is a definite 100% must start for me. Had a great week last week where they looked at him a lot. Had 10 receptions, 97 yards, and a touchdown. The only real options they have in the passing game there are Jarvis Landry and David Njoku, and Jarvis is still going to eat on Sunday against the Pittsburgh Steelers. For the Steelers, you have Antonio Brown, who is a definite must start. Yes, I know. And Juju, who has turned into a definite must-start. Right now, the 15th ranked wide receiver in fantasy football PPR leagues. And he's already had his bye week. It's impressive. He's had double-digit fantasy points every game so far this year. And I don't expect that to change here against the Cleveland Browns. Like I said, they're coming off the bye week, the Steelers are. They've had a week to prepare for this game. They've already played this team once this year. They're going to be at home. I expect big numbers out of the offense of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And Juju Smith-Schuster is also a definite must-start for me here in Week 8. Redskins and Giants are next, and we'll start with the Redskins. And really the only name to talk about is Josh Doxson. Paul Richardson may not play. Jamison Crowder already ruled doubtful for this week. Not a whole lot of options in Washington. Best option, Josh Doctson, coming off his best game of the year, which was only 3 catches for 42 yards. Not exactly what I would call a best game for a lot of people, but he is really the only option. They do have a tough matchup against the New York Giants, currently the 6th rated defense against opposing wide receivers, giving up on average 31.4 points per game. The issue is they really have nobody to worry about on the defensive side other than Josh Doctson. I expect a little bit more Jordan Reed, possibly even some Vernon Davis in this game. We don't know the status of Chris Thompson yet, but I'm not buying Josh Doctson here for week 8, and he's going to be a sit. On the Giants side of the football, you have Odell Beckham and Sterling Shepard. Now, Odell Beckham, obvious must start. If you got him, you're playing him. I don't care if he's got a pee on the sidelines or not. Sterling Shepard, though, is somebody who we continue to pay attention to. 5 catches, 167 yards this past week, 21 fantasy points, and is somebody who's really starting to get involved a little bit more in this offense. Evan Ingram was not a factor in his first game back. I really like Sterling Shepard in the preseason. I expected him to get a lot of one-on-one coverage due to all the defensive attention going towards Barkley and Odell and Ingram. I thought Sterling Shepard would be the guy who would be able to sneak through the cracks a lot. He got that opportunity this week. He's had double-digit points 4 out of the last 5 weeks, and he gets a decent matchup here this week against the Redskins, who are now the 20th ranked defense against opposing wide receivers. Last week against the Dallas Cowboys, gave up 211 yards and a touchdown, and that's to the Cowboys wide receivers. I really like Sterling Shepard again this week, and he's definitely a start for me as a solid flex play here in week 8. Seahawks and Lions are next. We'll start off with the Seahawks, talking about Doug Baldwin and Tyler Lockett. Now, you guys know if you've watched this show for any amount of time, I like Doug Baldwin on this show. I was really high on him in the preseason. Then he got hurt. Then he came out and missed the first 3 weeks of the season. Came back, didn't do a whole lot his first 2 weeks back. But the week before the bye week against the Raiders, 6 catches for 91 yards. You have to remember with Doug Baldwin, he really didn't get a preseason, much of a training camp. That's what the beginning of this season has turned into for him. Weeks 4, 5, 6, and 7 are what I am considering his preseason. Coming off the bye week, I expect Doug Baldwin to not only be back to full health, but be back to the same Doug Baldwin that we've seen in years past. The guy who's averaged 7+ touchdowns and about 1,000 yards a year. He's going to be a part of this offense going forward, and I'm starting him this week against the Detroit Lions. Yes, it's a tougher matchup. More than likely, he'll have Darius Slay on him, but it doesn't matter. I'm taking Doug Baldwin, hoping for the volume, and I think he's a safe start here for week 8. Tyler Lockett, on the other hand, is somebody who I think starts to lose value because it starts going towards Doug Baldwin. Now, Tyler Lockett has that touchdown upside. I get it. He's had a touchdown 5 out of 6 games so far this year, and he's somebody who Russell Wilson has really developed a rapport with, and they have good chemistry together. Tyler Lockett, with the bye weeks that are here, maybe you had a Julio Jones, a Calvin Ridley, Mohamed Sanu, no, you didn't have anybody from Dallas, but maybe you had Keenan Allen or Tyrell Williams or Mike Williams, whoever it may be, somebody on a bye or some injuries. Tyler Lockett is still a decent flex play for me here in week 8. For the Lions, we have their 3-headed monster of Golden Tate, Marvin Jones, and Kenny Golladay, but can we start all 3 of these guys? I don't know if I can do that here in week 8. It's a decent matchup against the Seahawks, but they're giving up 32 points per game to opposing wide receivers. Back in week 5, they gave up 235 yards and a touchdown to the 3-headed monster of the Rams, but things are a little bit different in Detroit now than it was then. Kerryon Johnson has started to emerge in this offense. Maybe some of these passing plays in the past turn into running plays in the future because they're actually getting something out of them with Kerryon Johnson. If I had to sit one, this week I'm going to sit Kenny Golladay. Golden Tate is the safest play in my book. He's somebody that you can count on almost for double digits every single week. He's had him every single week with the exception of week 5. Marvin Jones has still been somewhat inconsistent, but I'm looking for them to get him going outside of the bye week, get him back into that level that he was playing at last year, where he was a top 5 fantasy wide receiver. Kenny Golladay has been, super productive here early. He struggled last week against the Miami Dolphins, only 2 catches for 37 yards. Hasn't had more than 4 catches in a game, though, back since week 3. He's somebody who's kind of plateaued a little bit. And in a game like this, where they may lean a little bit more on the run, I'm going to sit Kenny Golladay, start Marvin Jones here for week 8. Bucks and Bengals are next. So for the Bucks, you have Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Deshaun Jackson. Now, Deshaun Jackson wasn't really involved last week. He did end up with 10 fantasy points, but that was mostly because of a rushing touchdown from Deshaun Jackson. Only had 2 catches for 25 yards against a Browns team that we expected for him to do a little bit better against. Now, Mike Evans, still overly productive, still the number 1 wide receiver in that offense, had 7 catches for 107 yards last week. Chris Godwin, somebody who's also involved, 5 catches for 59. Godwin is kind of the safe play at this time. He's got double-digit points every week except back for in week 4. It's a decent matchup going up against the 22nd rated defense in the Cincinnati Bengals. Last week against the Kansas City Chiefs, 161 yards and a touchdown. They've allowed touchdowns to opposing wide receivers every single week, with the exception of week 5 against the Dolphins. And it's something where we know they're going to throw the ball a lot in Tampa Bay, right? We know Mike Evans is going to be the number 1 target. We know Deshaun Jackson is going to have those home run play opportunities. They're going to throw more than they're going to run in Tampa Bay. And all 3 of these guys are worth a look depending on your league and league size. Mike Evans, definite must start, absolutely. Deshaun Jackson, he's relegated more to a flex play only in 10 to 12 team leagues. Godwin, same thing, flex play only. Getting into the little larger leagues, the 12, maybe 14 team leagues, Chris Godwin becomes more valuable. But otherwise, all these guys are almost plug and play because we know they're going to throw a lot in Tampa Bay, especially this week. For the Bengals, we have A.J. Green and Tyler Boyd, and it never fails, right? Last week on one of the RotoBaller shows, I said that Tyler Boyd is almost to that point of being a must-start every single week. He had 20 points a game 4 out of the last 5. And then what does he do here in week 7? Of course he goes out against the Kansas City Chiefs for 3 catches and 27 yards. Thanks, Tyler. I go out there and give you a vote of confidence, and you come out and put up 3 for 27. But I get it. It's okay. It's going to happen. There's going to be bad games. Tyler Boyd is still heavily targeted in this offense. He's a big part of this offense. A.J. Green is always going to get the bulk of the defensive attention. I get it. But they have a great matchup against the Tampa Bay Bucks, who are the 31st ranked defense to opposing wide receivers, giving up over 45 points a game. They've allowed touchdowns to opposing wide receivers every single week, including a big week in week 6 to the Falcons, where they gave up 279 yards receiving. It's a team that you can definitely throw on in Tampa, and that's what they do best in Cincinnati. I expect a lot of throwing in this game from Andy Dalton. A.J. Green and Tyler Boyd are both going to be starts for me here in week 8. Jets and Bears are next, and we'll go with the Jets and another disappointment from week 7. What happened with Jermaine Kearse? Terrell Pryor was cut. Quincy Enunwa's hurt. We expect a lot from Jermaine Kearse because in week 6 he had 9 catches for 94 yards. Then he comes out against the Vikings and has a big fat 0 receptions for 0 yards. No idea where that came from, but it's slightly concerning. Now they get the Chicago Bears, which sounds bad on paper, but you can actually throw against the Chicago Bears. They're the 28th ranked team to opposing wide receivers, giving up over 44 points a game. They're a lot easier to throw on than they are to run on, and I expect the New York Jets to do just that. Robbie Anderson and Jermaine Kearse should see a decent amount of volume this week in week 8. However, I think Jermaine Kearse may be one of those PPR options only. I do expect him to get more involved in this offense. We know Enunwa won't be there and Pryor is gone. They have to throw the ball somewhere. Chris Herndon from the tight end position has started to take some of that value from a couple of these guys. Robbie Anderson has never really been a PPR stud. He's more of a big play threat. He hasn't had more than 3 catches in a game yet this year. Last week, 3 catches for 44 yards. You're not going to expect a whole lot of volume from Robbie Anderson, but the touchdown upside is always there. I'm going to start Robbie Anderson this week, but I'm going to sit Jermaine Kearse unless you're in a 12-team or larger league and you need a flex play. He has that potential upside, but getting the goose egg in week 7 is cause for concern for me, and right now the only dice I'm going to roll is on Robbie Anderson. On the Bears side of the football, you have Allen Robinson and Taylor Gabriel, both of which were absolute disappointments in week 7 against the New England Patriots. Allen Robinson couldn't even get on the field in the fourth quarter. He was on the sidelines watching them make a comeback. He had 1 catch for 4 yards all game. That was it. Taylor Gabriel didn't do much better. 3 catches for 26 yards. You know there was something weird going on in Chicago when their leading receiver from the wide receiver position was Kevin White, who had 2 catches for 64 yards. Yes, I know all of them almost came on a Hail Mary there at the end of the game where he was 1 yard short of a touchdown there as time expired. I get it. but something just wasn't clicking for the Chicago Bears. Trey Burton had a great game, but none of the wide receivers really produced much of anything. And in a game where Mitch threw over 300 yards again, none of these guys were overly efficient. But now they get a great matchup against the Jets, the 30th ranked defense to opposing wide receivers, giving up almost 45 points per game. Last week against the Vikings, 211 yards, 2 touchdowns for the wide receivers. That is now the 3rd straight week they've given up multiple touchdowns to opposing wide receivers. I'm going to go ahead and start Taylor Gabriel as a flex only this week. And I know he burned a lot of people last week, but if you're looking for a bye week replacement, I'll go as a flex play for Taylor Gabriel. Allen Robinson, on the other hand, there's something going on with Allen Robinson, and we knew it in the preseason. He didn't really fit what Mitch Trubisky was, but now Mitch is getting a little bit better. But what concerns me is at the most crucial time of the game, they took Allen Robinson off the field last week, and I don't understand why or what is going on there. And until I get more understanding of that, Allen Robinson is going to my bench and is going to be a sit for me this week unless you have no better options. Ravens at Panthers are next, and this one's going to take a second because I need to address my hashtags. I'm starting to get some questions about my hashtags of Never Crabtree and Never Funchess because they're actually starting to produce some decent numbers here week to week, and I told people I would address it here in this episode. Now we'll start off with Michael Crabtree and the Baltimore Ravens. He's actually been pretty consistent here throughout the year. He hasn't had a big game yet, has yet to break 100 yards, only 2 touchdowns so far in the year, but he does have double-digit points every single week with the exception of week 4. And for that reason, I'm going to be completely honest, I do not like to flip-flop. However, for this week, I'm going to alter the hashtag to Sometimes Crabtree. This may be one of those times that I will start Michael Crabtree. I can't believe I said it, but I do have to go out there and give an unbiased opinion regardless of a hashtag that I've used now for 2 years. It is now changed to Sometimes Crabtree. I will start him here in week 8. As far as John Brown goes, in my mind, he is the top receiver in Baltimore. Another great week last week, 7 catches, 134 yards and a touchdown. Going into Carolina, he's the top target of Joe Flacco in an offense that features John Brown. I'm going to start him also, despite, the defense in Carolina is not horrible. They're the 16th ranked defense against opposing wide receivers, middle of the pack. You can throw on them. Last week, Philadelphia only had 100 yards from their wide receivers and a touchdown, but they have allowed a touchdown to an opposing wide receiver for 5 straight weeks. John Brown, he's a definite start for me. And yes, we're going now Sometimes Crabtree for this week. On the other side of the ball, we have the Carolina Panthers and who I've always referred to as Never Funchess. And I don't know if I can break this one. Listen, I can admit my wrongs at times, and I did that with Crabtree. Funchess, though, I don't know if I can do it. Yes, he's had double digits 4 out of the last 5 games, touchdowns in back-to-back weeks, but now he gets the Baltimore Ravens, who are the 3rd-ranked defense against opposing wide receivers. Last week against the Saints, they only allowed 113 yards to wide receivers and 1 touchdown. If you take away the bad week that Baltimore had, week 2 against Cincinnati, where they gave up 4 touchdowns, this is the top-rated defense in football to opposing wide receivers, and I'm not going to chance it, and I'm not breaking the hashtag on this one. This hashtag remains Never Funchess for week 8. Colts and Raiders are next. So for the Colts, you have T.Y. Hilton and Chester Rogers, who we'll talk about. T.Y. Hilton came out. Did he have a great game numbers-wise? No, he absolutely did not. He only had 4 catches for 25 yards. The other side of that is 2 of those catches were for touchdowns. Short touchdowns, but regardless, it made it look like he had a great fantasy day that now gives him double digits in every single week he's played with Andrew Luck, and I expect that to continue. If you have T.Y. Hilton going up against the Oakland Raiders, he's a start for me this week. Chester Rogers is somebody who's been a pleasant surprise ever since T.Y. Hilton went out. Last week against Buffalo, only 4 catches for 40 yards, 8 fantasy points in PPR leagues, but had double digits the 3 weeks before that. He's going to be somebody who gets a solid opportunity, but as of now, with T.Y. Hilton back, Chester Rogers is no more than a flex play in deeper leagues, and T.Y. Hilton's going to go back to his must-start status every single week. For the Raiders, you have the most unexciting pair of wide receivers that you could possibly think of, almost, maybe outside of the Bills. Oh yeah, no, the Bills are worse. Anyway, Jordy Nelson and Martavis Bryant are now the number 1 and number 2 in Oakland, going up against a Colts secondary, which is definitely underrated. The 13th ranked defense there to opposing wide receivers. Last week against Buffalo, it doesn't matter. Buffalo can't throw the ball anyway. The week before that against the Jets, they gave up 199 yards and a touchdown to opposing wide receivers, giving up on average 34 points per game to those receivers. It's a decent matchup. I get it. But is Jordy Nelson ready to be the number 1 again? He thrived in this offense somewhat as the number 2. The week before their bye week, though, against Seattle, only 2 catches for 6 yards. Now, he had touchdowns the 3 prior weeks, and he had kind of fit into that old Michael Crabtree role. Putting Jordy back as the number 1. Is he ready for that? Going up against the Indianapolis secondary? That's a risk for me. I'm not going to start either one of these guys. Jordy Nelson or Martavis Bryant are both going to be a sit for me this week until I can see how they react to this new role that they have in this offense as being the number 1 and 2 option in a passing offense, which doesn't look very good on paper. 49ers and Cardinals are next, and this one kind of hinges on what happens with Patrick Peterson in Arizona. He's requested a trade. The Cardinals have come out and said, hey, we're not trading him. He's demanding a trade. This could get ugly real quick, and he could end up on another team here at any moment. If he's traded away, we'll start off with the San Francisco 49ers, Marquise Goodwin and Pierre Garçon. At this point, Pierre Garçon is a must-sit every single week, and until something drastically change, I'm not even really going to talk much about Pierre Garçon going forward. Marquise Goodwin has that high upside, though. This past week against the Rams, only 2 catches for 24 yards, which is drastically different than the week before. We had 4 for 126 and 2 touchdowns against the Packers. He's somebody who has upside. But the only way that I start Marquise Goodwin this week is if Patrick Peterson has already been dealt and no longer on the Arizona Cardinals. If Patrick Peterson is still playing as an Arizona Cardinal this week, I'm sitting both Pierre Garçon and Marquise Goodwin. I'm not taking the risk on an offense that has proven to be inconsistent at best right now in San Francisco. CJ Beathard looks good at times, but neither one of these guys can be consistent enough to crack my fantasy lineup at this time. For the Cardinals, I said it in my running back video. If you haven't checked it out yet, go ahead and go check it out. I really expect this offense to take a turn for the better. They finally got rid of Mike McCoy, one of the worst offensive coordinators in all of football, and now Byron Leftwich gets a chance to really turn this offense around. There's really nowhere to go for him but up. Larry Fitzgerald and Christian Kirk both last week. Larry Fitzgerald had a decent game, ended up with 14 fantasy points, finally got a touchdown last week, 4 catches on 40 yards, his first touchdown of the year receiving, and he looked healthy. More than anything else, he looked like the old Larry Fitzgerald, somebody who's very reliable, very consistent. Josh Rosen had no time. The play calling was horrible. Christian Kirk and him just could not get on the same page. Despite Christian Kirk having 8 fantasy points, 3 catches on 57 yards, he's had double-digit fantasy points 3 out of the last 5 weeks. He's definitely somebody to pay attention to also. And like I said, I really expect for this offense to start to turn the corner and go back the right direction. I'm actually going to start Larry Fitzgerald this week, going up against the San Francisco 49ers, who last week against the Rams gave up 178 yards and a touchdown. The week before that, they gave up 264 yards and 2 touchdowns to the Packers. This is a team that you can throw on, and I'm expecting improvement in Arizona, who's going to be playing at home, new offensive coordinator. It could be a little bit of momentum finally for the Cardinals to build off of. I'm going to start Larry Fitzgerald. Christian Kirk, 12-team leagues and larger, is a flex play in PPR formats. He's somebody who's still going to see a lot of volume. He's the clear number 1 target of Josh Rosen. May not be the red zone threat like Larry Fitzgerald is, but he's somebody who's going to be involved there for those deeper league guys. Packers and Rams are next, and there could be a whole lot of offense in this game. We'll start off with the Packers. Devontae Adams must start every single week. No time wasted with him. Randall Cobb is actually practicing this week. There's a chance he plays. Geronimo Allison also practicing, chance that he plays this week also. If they both play, that really hurts the value of the rookie Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who produced while these guys have been out the last 2 weeks that they played before the bye week. However, we really don't know yet 100% about Randall Cobb and Geronimo Allison. We do know about Devontae Adams, but after that, it's a crapshoot. We need to wait until later in the week. Let's find out how limited these guys are. If Cobb or Allison sit, Scantling becomes viable again. If Cobb and Allison play, then all of a sudden Scantling isn't much of a value, and now I'm going to start looking towards starting Randall Cobb or Geronimo Allison more as a flex play. Really depends on their health and how limited they are at week's end. So make sure you're paying attention to the practice reports, and maybe on Saturday night's live show, we can touch on these guys and see who we can trust at that point based off of their health. For the Rams, we know we have Brandon Cooks and Robert Woods, and both are must starts absolutely every single week. That offense is going to produce points regardless, and you don't want to take the chance of sitting either one of those guys on any given week. Cooper Kupp, still a question mark. We really don't know if he's going to play or not yet. He hasn't been ruled out yet, which is a good thing. Keep an eye on those practice reports. Obviously, if he goes, he's a must start. Also, just something we have to pay attention to also here remainder of the week. New Orleans and Minnesota is up next, and I'm going to start every wide receiver in this matchup. I'm just going to lump them all together. Michael Thomas, Traquan Smith, Stephon Diggs, and Adam Thielen will all be starts for me this week. All three of those four guys are definites, obviously. The one that's not, Traquan Smith. He's still only owned in like 8% of leagues and ESPN leagues. He's somebody that needs to be rostered, and I have him as a start this week as a flex play only. The Minnesota secondary is banged up. Xavier Rhodes got hurt last week. Whether he misses time or not, we're waiting to find out, but there's a lot of injuries in that Minnesota secondary, and Traquan Smith has proven to be somebody that can handle more work in this offense. It looks like he's going to be the number 2 wide receiver going forward. Cameron Meredith wasn't even targeted last week. He only had 3 catches for 44 yards, but the week before that, before their bye week, 3 catches for 111 and 2 touchdowns. Huge upside for Traquan Smith. Grab him if you haven't already. If you're in a pinch and you need a flex play, whether you're dealing with buys or injuries, he's somebody that could really get you by here for this week and possibly moving forward. Patriots and Bills are next, and we'll start off with the Patriots, Julian Edelman and Josh Gordon. To me, Julian Edelman is a very safe play and is going to be a start for me here in Week 8. He's only been back for 3 weeks. All 3 weeks, he's scored double-digit fantasy points in PPR leagues, and he's a safe play for you here again in Week 8. Josh Gordon, though, I'm going to be bold on Josh Gordon. I'm going to sit him this week against the Buffalo Bills. I get it. I trash the Bills a lot. They're kind of referred to as like flaming hot garbage at times. But if they have anything going for them, it's their pass defense. Their secondary is doing a great job. And Josh Gordon, coming off his best game, 4 catches for 100 yards, now gets Tre'Davious White this week. And the Bills' defense is 4th against opposing wide receivers, only giving up 31 points. Now, I'm sitting Josh Gordon because the Patriots have so many other ways to beat you. They're not going to force feed the ball to Gordon when they can beat you with Gronk, Edelman, White, even Hogan. They have other options in that offense. They're not going to take their chances against Tre'Davious White in that defense. I'm going to sit Josh Gordon, even though I know it's a gamble here for Week 8. All right, so those were all my start sits for the wide receiver position here for Week 8. Hopefully that helps set your lineups a little bit. If you have other questions, ask them below. Huge community of people here willing to help out. Almost 25,000. We're getting close. Make sure you have that subscribe button clicked with the alarm notification. Going live Saturday night, 9:30 p.m. Eastern. Looking forward to talking with you guys, interacting a little bit, doing about an hour and 15-minute Q&A. It's going to be fun. We're going to have some fun with it, and I'm looking forward to it. Make sure you guys have a good rest of your week, and we'll talk to you later. Thanks. Bye.